Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this July 30, 2014 edition of Nightcast. At least 17 people have been killed after a landslide buried some 40 houses and trapped about 150 people in a village in West India.
It is the monsoon season and has been raining very heavily in this part over the last few days. It's about 200 kilometers east of Mumbai where I'm in right now. And yes, the estimate is that there were about 150 people in this village. What we don't have clarity on right now is when exactly this occurred. Some people are saying that it was possibly very early in the morning, while others have put the time at about 8 a.m. local time. So it's difficult right now to find out whether people were out and about or whether they were in their homes sleeping.
But Yukita, the landslides, as we mentioned, quite common in that area. Has the weather been extraordinary, or has it pretty much been an average year and this is just a very unfortunate, tragic accident?
Well, it's been raining as normal. It is expected to rain heavily during this particular month and for the next month as well. Having said that, while landslides, small landslides are quite common, we haven't seen something which, seems to be of this scale, where there seem to be about 40 houses trapped underneath the debris, underneath the rubble of the mountain that came down.
And friends, that was Yogita Lemay reporting from Mumbai, and teams of rescue workers managed to save 6 people in the main village in the Pune district, but have been hindered by the terrain. And that story, friends, relates to the 4th seal of Revelation. Let me bring that forward. That relates to the 4th seal, even though the main seal has been described as being what Jesus Christ called it in plain language, loimus, disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. But Jesus Christ also said that between the 3rd seal, the black horse of famine, and the 5th seal, the great tribulation, there would be seismic activity, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, and this landslide is certainly an example of a big commotion on the ground. And as the report mentioned, some 17 people have been killed, and then 40 houses trapped about 150 people in a village in West India. Our next story also relates to this 4th seal, friends. It relates to it in that first term that Jesus Christ described for this seal, the term of loimos, disease epidemics, plagues, the pestilence. Scientists have been aware of the Ebola virus since the mid-1970s, but so far, no vaccine or cure has been developed. Ebola kills up to 90% of those infected with it, but patients have a better chance of survival if they receive early treatment, according to the government officials involved with this. It spreads through contact with an infected person's body fluids. The outbreak, the world's deadliest to date, was first reported in Guyana in February. It then spread to Liberia and Sierra Leone. David Schuckman reports.
Every few years, the Ebola virus emerges from the jungle and crosses from animals to humans, a potentially deadly threat first identified back in 1976. An expedition to the forests of Congo was investigating a mysterious illness. The virus was discovered by a scientist, Peter Pio, and he's now appalled that it's still causing outbreaks.
Well, it's very sad that this is happening again, that we haven't learned the lessons from the past, where through very simple measures we can control this epidemic. But I understand it, because people in West Africa have never been exposed to it. Some even don't believe that Ebola exists.
Once inside the human body, the virus causes internal bleeding, and because it's carried by bodily fluids, it can be passed among families or to people handling the victims. With a high rate of fatalities, Ebola is very dangerous, but there are limits to its spread. The virus is far less contagious than flu, for example, or SARS. You need to be very close to victims to become infected. There's also some natural immunity. About 10% of people in Africa, and more here in Britain, have a genetic trait that helps fight the virus. And outbreaks can be contained. Dozens have been shut down in recent years. It all depends on enforcing tough controls on hygiene.
Ebola, like all viruses, can be absolutely contained by quarantine. That's the one universally effective antiviral. So essentially, if you have the virus, they can lock you away in a room. It won't necessarily make you better, and there are no treatments for Ebola, but it protects the rest of the world by preventing the spread of the infection.
A lab on the front line in West Africa. But what if the virus goes further? If someone infected flies to Britain? This was explored today by the government's emergency committee, COBRA. But airlines and health authorities are watching closely, so the risks are said to be very low. The challenge is in Africa. Tonight, Liberia closed all of its schools. Desperate measures till Ebola is stopped. David Schuckman, BBC News.
Friends, the Gaza conflict, now in its 23rd day, is the longest between Israel and militants from Gaza. The Israeli military say they have hit more than 4,000 targets since the operation began. It says of its main objectives, one of its main objectives is to destroy tunnels used by militants to infiltrate Israel. More than 1,300 Palestinians and 58 Israelis have now died. Most of have died in this conflict. Most of the Palestinian deaths have been civilians. Orla Gurin reports from Tel Aviv.
Israel's big guns pounding Gaza again today. Israel calls this Operation Protective Edge. But this massive assault has now killed more than 1,300 Palestinians, the vast majority of them civilians. This army video gives a close-up view of troops in action in Gaza. They're hunting for Hamas militants and their network of tunnels. Some have already been used to get attackers into Israel. The army says destroying the tunnels will take a few more days, but a senior official told the BBC that may not mean the end of the operation. This former national security advisor is even saying Israel could reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip as a last resort.
At the end of the day, we might be a situation in which we don't have any other alternative. If Hamas will not stop launch rockets and missiles into Israel, as it did even today, we might find ourselves in a situation that we don't have any chance, any other alternative.
So you think a reoccupation of Gaza is possible?
It's possible, yes. We are preparing ourselves for that, because we might be in a situation that we don't have any other alternative, so we are preparing ourselves.
Among Israelis there are divisions about tactics, but little or no argument about the war itself. Here in Israel there's overwhelming support for the offensive in Gaza. Opinion polls suggest it's as high as 90%. Whatever the international community may say, whatever condemnation comes from abroad, Israelis see this as self-defense. Some want the army to go even further.
Look, it's an army, we have a war, or we are like a friendship friend that just have a fight or something. No, it's more than that, and I'm not apologizing to anyone.
Even after all of these dead Palestinian civilians?
No, I'm sorry about that, but I'm not apologizing.
This was Tel Aviv on Saturday night. The chant from a small group of extreme right demonstrators. There's no school in Gaza. There are no children left. They came to heckle an anti-war rally organised by left-wing campaigners. They still believe in peace, but say it's now an empty word in Israel. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tel Aviv.
Friends, according to a UN official, Israel launched a deadly attack on a UN school housing refugees in Gaza, despite repeated warnings that civilians were sheltering there. Now, that's what the UN has said. But UN spokesman Chris Gunness said the world stands disgraced by the attack in which 15 were reported kills. Now, here we go again. People love to attack Israel, who did not start this war between Israel and Gaza. Not a word is mentioned here about, hey, we're sorry that Hamas has been digging tunnels and coming in and killing your soldiers and kidnapping your people and killing your people, killing your civilians. A spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lanier, said the Israeli military did not knowingly target UN buildings. And friends, I still have to wonder if Hamas, one of Hamas's own rockets didn't hit that building. I mean, I think somebody needs to just come right out and suggest that's a good possibility, because Israel doesn't purposely target these things. If it did hit it, it did it unknowingly. It gave warnings they were going to come in here and there. But we don't even know Israel did it for sure. It's just, Israel's over there in a war, but Hamas could have done it for sympathy reasons, and try to make it look like it was Israel. And even if it was Israel, Israel gives people warnings. We're coming in here. The lieutenant colonel said it was a huge challenge to keep civilian impact to a minimum.
So from our initial investigation on this incident in the early hours of this morning, there was mortar fire from near that school at our forces, and there was an exchange of fire. We are looking at the result and what caused this human tragedy. We are looking at it. I can't convey much more than that at this time. We have seen over the last 48 hours several attempts by Hamas to pin various tragedies on Israel, like the incident in Shifa Hospital or at the Shati Beach camp, where they were clearly Palestinian rockets that were fired from Gaza and hit civilian populated areas. So
when you say near that school, when you say you were coming under mortar fire from near that school, I mean, you don't have to respond to that, do you? If you know there is a school that's packed with thousands of refugees, why do you need to respond to that mortar fire, even if it is near that school?
So here's what we know. We're not talking about a handful of terrorists. We are talking about battalions of organized, semi-state, armed to the teeth people that are, quasi-military. We've seen the types of attacks they carried out with the footage that they released yesterday from Gaza, attacking one of our points, one of our positions. So they are carrying out huge barrages of mortars at IDF forces operating in the area, and indeed it is a huge challenge to try and respond to that and keep the civilian impact a minimum. We are operating under that understanding that there is a possibility of civilians in the area, but we are going to great lengths in order to try and minimize that impact. Sometimes in this type of conflict there are and can be civilian casualties. It is not an intention, and it is most important to understand that we definitely do not target UN facilities. What we do know, on the other hand, is that Hamas have extensively, and at least on 3 instances that we know about, have placed rockets within UN schools. We understand that United Nations in Gaza do not have weapons and cannot prevent that from happening. But this is the reality. This organization has no regard for any international symbols, will abuse and exploit everything at hand, whether it's ambulances, schools, mosques, hospitals, UN premises, and they've done it time and time again, and this is what we're facing.
Well, you're condemning Hamas there, but Chris Gunness, who's the spokesman for the main United Nations relief agency in Gaza, Gaza, which runs that school that has been hit, has condemned the Israeli attack on that school, and he has said that it was the world stands disgraced by what happened at that school. What's your response to what he's got to say?
Well, the IDF is currently reviewing this incident. I think we need to get to the bottom of it before we jump to conclusions. As I've said, we've seen time and time again Hamas shooting rockets from in Gaza, and at least in the last 3 weeks, in at least 250 cases, they've hit within Gaza territory. So before we jump to conclusions, we need to find out what happened. And it is important to understand, in any case, there was no intentional targeting of a UN premises in Gaza.
It's very interesting. Israel calmly says, gives evidence where Hamas's own rockets have hit things and where they've even staged things like that before. And the hatred that Hamas has for Israel, I wouldn't put it past them one bit if Hamas's own rockets were not responsible for hitting that UN building. No one in Israel seems to really have evidence that Israel's army did it. And regardless, we're in a war. We're in a war. And in the previous report, one of the best things I've heard tonight, because of the hatred that Hamas brews up against Israel, one of the best things I heard that the man say tonight, there's a consideration Israel may retake possession of Gaza. Now, if this were strictly a carnal thing and a thing of men only, I'd say that would be the best move in the world. However, we know even though Jesus Christ conquered him in a supreme battle for world rulership, there have been many battles for ruling the world. That's what a lot of men do. Everybody, a lot of governments, they want to be the top dog in charge of it all and rule the world. Germany has that in their Assyrian blood going back to the ancient days of the Bible alongside Israel. World War I was an attempt by Germany to rule the world. Round 2 of World War, same thing. Round 3 will be nothing short of that, nothing less. Friends, that's it for our Wednesday night report. Thanks for joining me. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We're doing a short report tonight. We'll be back again Thursday night with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying, good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.